Due Process, winner of 22 Regional Emmy Awards, including the 2012 and 2013 Mid-Atlantic Emmys for Outstanding Discussion Series. Due Process is a presentation of Rutgers School of Law, Newark, and the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. Studio facilities provided by the Rutgers ITV Studio, Division of Continuing Studies.
Here's my view on it. This is why Mount Laurel decision is an abomination.
Mount Laurel, a South Jersey suburb, unknown to even much of this state, until a landmark case launched a national movement. A name now linked to the notion of fair housing, of requiring even prosperous towns to ensure a fair share of affordable units. A name now back in the news as a governor rejects the nearly 40-year rule, and the state Supreme Court says no. Mount Laurel upheld on this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding from Genova Burns.
A New York Times editorial recently praised them as among the most important civil rights decisions of the modern era. A pair of landmark rulings by the New Jersey Supreme Court, the first of their kind in the nation, prohibiting exclusionary zoning and requiring a fair share of affordable housing for every municipality in the state. I'm Raymond Brown.
And I'm Sandra King, and our focus for this edition of Due Process, what has come to be known simply as Mount Laurel. It began nearly 50 years ago when the South Jersey suburb blocked just 36 low-income units for its own displaced residents, most of them poor and black. The NAACP filed suit, and the rest is history.
But it's been a troubled history, praised by some, condemned by others, and still creating dissension, resistance, and now still another major Supreme Court ruling. Senator Ray Lesniak is among those who applaud the court's new 3-2 decision, which says no to the governor's attempts to derail Mount Laurel, while Assembly Republican Whip Scott Rumana calls the ruling another irrational chapter in what he views as the absurd Mount Laurel doctrine. Welcome to you both.
Well, nice to be here.
This is a subject matter that is very important to the people who focused on it and maybe not so well known to people who have not had time to really digest the opinions or focus on the controversy. But you've been highly critical of the Supreme Court ruling, which is essentially one in which says that the regulatory scheme that's in place doesn't accomplish the objectives set forth by the court and followed up by the legislature. Why are you so critical of it?
Because I've seen the damage that it's caused to communities throughout the entire state with respect to the practical application of the rulings. It's really the second decision that became the lightning rod for communities.
What's the core of your objection? Keep in mind that there are viewers who probably haven't thought much about this.
Correct.
What do you think is the core harm that's been done by Mount Laurel and its progeny? And we'll take it from there.
Two terms: builder's remedy and bonus density. Okay. Those are your big problems with this case law. The bonus density issue, the practical impact on communities is that you don't get just the low-income units that the Council on Affordable Housing may assign to your community. What you end up getting is 5, 6, 7 market rate or units to be sold at market rate prices, and then each individual low-income unit being built into a project. So if they assign you 100 low-income units, you're getting 700 total housing units. Now that has a wicked impact on communities, suburban communities throughout the state of New Jersey.
Let me stop you for a minute.
Sure.
The notion of the right to affordable housing for every community in the state of New Jersey, that concept, that idea that there has to be a fair share, as it's been called, for low and moderate income people? Do you object to the concept?
Again, I object to how the law has been applied throughout the state, and it's really the second decision where they came up with these concepts of builder's remedy and bonus density. 1983. And what you have is thousands and thousands of additional housing units that aren't sold to low-income citizens. They're sold at market rate prices, and it makes developers a lot of money. But it certainly doesn't address the concern that is raised in the initial Mount Laurel ruling, and it causes excessive damage to the environment. It causes more traffic congestion, more people in communities, and I come from an area that is heavily inundated with flooding. So now, when you overdevelop these properties, you're crucifying these citizens that live in flood areas, which is very troubling to the district that I represent. And so I just don't agree with how this policy has.
Skeptics would say that's a lot of verbiage behind which lies a resistance to letting poor people, people of color, into communities. And
that's just unequivocally untrue. That's not the point. I mean, you have to see so Wayne Township, where I'm from, in 2008, Council on Affordable Housing assigned us about 2,200 low-income units. Now, if you had to build the 2,200 low-income units only, that'd be a lot of housing. But you could maybe deal with that. The problem is the accelerator of the bonus density piece, which takes it from 2,200 to over 13,000 units. Now, that's doubling the population of the town. That's not practical. That's not rational. That's why I say it's an irrational decision by the court, because we're, controlling. We place a whole new value in the 90s going into the 2000s on open space preservation, protecting our environment. Those issues weren't even around when these decisions were initially made in the 70s and the 80s. It's a different world today. So we have to find another way to deal with the initial ruling.
Let me ask you to address at least the subtext of Scott's view, which is that there's been a departure from the core values of the original Mount Laurel decision through subsequent decisions and through the Council on Affordable Housing. Do you think that's true, or do you think we're still in the implementation?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with the Assemblyman. I believe we have really failed in our efforts to implement Mount Laurel. I think we come from a different place, because I believe that we have to affirmatively take steps that will work, that will make communities workable, so that they can open up affordable housing.
Where have we failed?
We failed to provide necessary incentives. We just passed, and I've been a sponsor under both Governor Christie and Governor Corzine, of billions of dollars of tax incentives for job creation. Good stuff, okay? But I tried to put in $200 million for redevelopment of affordable housing project, and the governor would have nothing to do with it. No, not at all. The problem is this governor and other governors have not really provided the necessary means to build affordable housing, because it takes a subsidy. You can't build in New Jersey housing that is affordable, unfortunately, for low and moderate income housing.
Let me go back to Sandy's question to Scott. Sure. At the core of the opposition, is it resistance to the principle of integrating low-income housing into communities, or is there something else that motivates it?
I think it depends on the individual. There's no doubt that there are many, I'm not saying the Assemblyman is, but there are other legislators who are opposed to the principle of requiring that municipalities open up their borders for low and moderate income housing. By the way, one other point here that's very important: Governor Corzine and the legislature changed the school funding law. A lot of the beef about from municipalities, and you're right about the core beliefs, they didn't want children. They didn't want children because children require public schools, and public schools require money. They didn't want children of low and moderate income families, okay? But we changed the school funding formula so that at-risk children get the same amount of money, school aid from the state, whether they're in Newark or whether they're in Warren. So municipalities shouldn't have that fear. So we're getting there. We still have a lot of work to do, because we're not doing a lot about market rate housing or affordable housing in the state.
Scott has said that Mount Laurel 2 was absurd, and that this latest Supreme Court decision is irrational. You find any common ground there?
Well, yes, okay, because the Fair Housing Act that the court's decision was based on, you know, there are problems with it. It set up a system that created numbers for each municipality and for regions that based on projections and job creation that are just exactly that.
So how would you do it?
I'll tell you how I would do it and how I'm going to do it. And let's hope that the legislature and the governor follow the lead. Based on the definition of low and moderate income housing, there are 44% of New Jersey residents would qualify for low and moderate income housing. So let's take a fair number. You know, we have to make a decision. What should be a guideline for each municipality? Half of that number, okay, whatever that is. So you have the problem is the Fair Share Housing Act required COA to make so many convoluted rules. They couldn't be followed.
Define what COA is.
Oh, that's right, Council on Affordable Housing. And I was condemning COA from the other side of the coin, that they weren't getting affordable housing built. We both came at them from both sides. Mm-hmm. But they had really an impossible job because we created a system that was difficult. But at the core of the current
litigation involves some question about how you project growth into the future and whether, in fact, you do it.
Based on the Fair Housing Act.
Right.
But we need to change the Fair Housing Act because you know when you have these, keep it simple. And that, by the way, the Supreme Court said that. They said, let's have a simple system. So I'm going to try to create a simple system that municipalities can live in, that can be funded, and that can open up and provide for affordable housing.
Puts you at odds, doesn't it, with the people who started it all, the people who are talked about in this book, Climbing Mount Laurel. What about the Peter O'Connor and the rest of the group who stand in some opposition to you? Mm-hmm. What do you say to them, and what's wrong with their argument?
What's wrong with their argument is it hasn't worked. And it hasn't worked for decades, all right? And I don't believe in sticking to an argument that is irrational and doesn't produce affordable housing for low and moderate income families. I believe we need to have affordable housing everywhere. In Elizabeth and cities, many of the housing projects that are in the cities that were built with federal aid that's gone now, they're horrible conditions. People are living in terrible conditions in the cities as well. So, you know,
which is one reason that allowing affordable housing in the suburbs.
Right, but at the same time, the jobs are where the mass transit is, and you can't do away with that. So, you can't have a cookie cutter one style fits all. All right. Basically, the bottom line is we haven't done much for affordable housing anywhere in this state, and that should be.
There have been a whole lot of units built.
Not enough. If you look at what should have been built, you're probably talking about 25% of what is really the need in the state. That's not good enough.
I just want to pick up on this point, because if you compare the number of total units built versus the number of low-income units built, you're coming back to the argument that I'm making. There were hundreds of thousands of total units built, and only a fraction of those being for low income, because most of these projects are heavy on the market rate side because of the structure that's in place because of the bonus density piece. I think it was in 2000. Let me just
come back to the core question. I don't mean to cut you off, even as I cut you off.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't clear to me earlier whether you agree with the core principle. The integration of low and moderate income families into suburban communities is a core value that needs to be advanced. And I guess we need to know that, because then the question is, how do you do it if you agree, or how do you deal with the court's long history of saying that's a key value?
Well, you know, the initial decision, I personally have a real problem if somebody was trying to use zoning for racial purposes, trying to keep.
But you don't doubt that was
But they do. They do.
I don't. You know,
absolutely.
I don't doubt that has taken place in the course of history. That is.
No, in New Jersey in 1975 when the court made its
in
first
1975, it's a different world than in 2013.
Is it?
I do believe that. Yes, I really do. I mean, I'm from a younger generation that came along after. I'm born in '64. So I'm post civil rights movements. You know, I mean, and the generation coming up behind me is you know, we're very different. There's a very different outlook on life that way.
But the same segregated housing project where I was born in '46 is still a segregated housing project in 2013.
And the state of New Jersey.
I was born in '46 also.
Okay, it's a good year.
And I'm not trying to throw the age to that. We should be clear about that.
And the state of New Jersey is segregated in its housing. So is this something that the New York Times is right in calling one of the most important, and they weren't just talking about New Jersey, one of the most important civil rights decisions ever made in this country?
Without a doubt, except for one caveat, and that is we have not done a good enough job of implementing it to make it really work. And that's what we need to do.
I also don't think you can't socially engineer. You can't force people to try to live.
Isn't that what we did with civil rights decisions?
Wait,
Well,
social engineering is keeping out low and moderate income families from living in towns. That's what social engineering is.
Well, no, but social engineering is also trying to force people into communities, and so I'm not sure that works. I mean, trying to come up with a way that you can have affordable places to live. Let me get to that point, because I mean, the argument, you know, the base argument is exclusionary zoning. That you had in the case of Mount Laurel, I think there were 3-acre zones, if I remember correctly, right? So you know that's a real. You're saying you can't build anything unless you're on a 3-acre zone. Well, yeah, okay,
remember,
I could see that.
And remember that it began with people actually being displaced from their shacks in Mount Laurel.
Right.
But then being zoned out of being able to remain in Mount Laurel.
Correct.
And the irony, of course, is that it was only 36 units, and had this municipality said yes to it, maybe there would have eventually been a Mount Laurel, but it wouldn't have been then.
Correct. So again, it's the application. I mean, you know, coming up with a plan where nonprofits are going to be the entity that's going to build the housing, and it's exclusive to just the number of units that would be low income. You know, I think communities, the suburban areas where you've had these explosions of you know, 500-600 unit projects that are, you know, they're not addressing, as the senator has mentioned, I mean, you're not addressing the low income piece, and you're making a developer a lot of.
For those.
Oh, absolutely. I blame the 1983 second decision that actually brought us the bonus density and builder's remedy process.
So that's it. You've got to have quotas, or otherwise this isn't going to happen.
Well, the Council on Affordable Housing sets quotas, but then they've got to be rational also. I mean, you know, I just gave you one example of one town where that 2,200 number was completely irrational. You know, nobody is growing anywhere in the state to that rate. The objective was trying to build 115,000 low-income units. Now, if you do that, if you put that through the formula, you're talking about 700,000 total housing units, roughly, right, being built in the state of New Jersey. Well, we haven't grown at all in the state of New Jersey to that rate. Our population doesn't grow that fast.
We're hearing reasonable arguments here, but I know you've heard, as I have, the argument that if you let poor people, if you let black people into suburban communities, those communities, the schools will go to hell, the crime will rise, it will be social disorganization. And one of the things that's interesting about this book, this Climbing Mount Laurel, which, by the way, is from Princeton University Press, done by social scientists who absolutely say that they have done the research and that, in fact, drugs, crime, blight, bad public schools have not been the result of that original housing project, which, of course, took 30 years to have built in Mount Laurel, but that hasn't happened. Does that cut any ice with you?
I think that this statement is a very dated statement. That's what I think. I mean, I don't think people run around in modern society in 2013 in the year 2013 and make those kind of statements. I think that those statements are I think that we've got a new generation of people that don't look at life like that. But I think that we have a generation of people that are committed to open space preservation,
not
protecting the environment.
Steve Lonigan, who ran for U.S. Senate, who opposed my Mortgage Transformation Act, which would have converted foreclosed, boarded up homes into affordable housing, okay? He vilified me because we would be bringing in poor people into neighborhoods throughout the state of New Jersey. So that attitude is still around, but luckily it doesn't carry that much weight anymore.
You don't think that fuels the argument against Mount Laurel?
Oh, that's
Candidly?
yes, absolutely. But
given the existence of that attitude, we've swept away the current regulatory scheme. Some have even suggested to get rid of COHA and have a new structure in place. If you were starting from scratch,
And that's what you want to do.
what would you build,
I wanna-
given the resistance that we're talking about?
Well, that's not going to be easy because, I mean, I put my Mortgage Transformation Act on the governor's desk 3 times, and he vetoed it 3 times. Third time, I said, well, maybe the third time's a charm. When he vetoed it, he said, Lesniak, the third time is not a charm. So it's going to be difficult to get this governor to sign anything that deals with affordable housing. He's run away from the problem. The third round rules that the Supreme Court just declared invalid were absolutely, totally designed so that there would be no affordable housing built under it, and that's why the court threw it out. I'm going to put a bill on his desk. The Supreme Court, and we'll get it through the Democratic legislature, and the Supreme Court invited us to. All right, and if the governor vetoes it this time,
insisted that you do.
Exactly. Yeah, and we should, as we need to. The governor, whether he.
But what's going to be the core characteristic of this?
The core characteristic will be the original Mount Laurel decisions that municipalities have to adopt zoning laws that have allow for a reasonable mix of housing within their borders. Okay, but there also has to be some funding involved, and some of that funding.
Can you get Scott's support for this idea?
I can't because there has to be density bonuses in order to provide the funding. So there has to be some density bonuses in there for sure.
Can you get fair share support?
I got it last time. The bill that I put on the governor's desk that the governor vetoed had fair share housing support. So absolutely yes.
I also want to turn back to the issue of we've got many communities. So, I mean, I think the senator and I come from similar circumstances with the fact that we're very densely populated areas. I mean, I'm from Wayne and very much in the northern section of the state, which is very densely populated. It's very much overdeveloped as it is. And what do you do in those circumstances where everything's built? All the land's basically built upon. And where do you go from there? Because
redevelopment.
we've got 55,000 people.
Redevelopment, Scott.
But what gets I know that, but there's we don't have. It's not like in the city of Paterson where you have 100-year-old buildings, and our communities are not that old. So there's not really much change beyond what we have today. I mean, as you go out in time, 50 years from now, maybe something gets redeveloped. But I don't necessarily, that's a real challenge for a lot of areas.
So, how do you win? How do you win his support?
Well, I mean, it is a challenge, but their zoning is going to have to allow for redevelopment, and if redevelopment can take place, there will be developers. We have plenty of them in the state of New Jersey who will be willing to go in if it's financially feasible. And that's where the density bonuses or subsidies, by the way, I'm sorry that the governor took away from municipalities. They took away the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. He's tried to. So we have to be realistic. We have to, by the way, I know this is about Mount Laurel, but we need to have an overall housing project, a housing program, because we can't forget about the affordable housing needs
But from
of
what I hear,
people
your
in
proposed
Elizabeth,
structure,
too.
there's going to be a funding component. Can you fund it adequately?
Well, there will be a density bonus funding provision in there. We're going to have to figure out a way.
And with
I'm not there yet.
With 40 seconds left, tell me what you foresee. You've got a pretty short timeline that the Supreme Court has given. You say you can get your bill through the legislature, and then it will go to the governor, and then what happens?
The governor will veto it, and the Supreme Court will uphold it.
And Scott, what do you
Certainly
say?
hope not. I certainly hope not. Look, the minute bonus density is mentioned, I mean, it was nice to hear that we have some common ground on this issue. But if there's bonus density involved, you're not going to get the support of the people, and certainly the people in areas where you are overdeveloped as it is, and communities that just don't want to have all that extra housing.
And this discussion will continue, but it's not going to continue here because we are out of time. With our thanks to Assemblyman Scott Rumana and Senator Ray Lesniak. And let us know what you make of Mount Laurel by going to our Due Process website or facebook.com/DueProcessTV.
And come back and join us next week and every week for critical issues of justice, law, and public policy that affect your life. For Sandy, Associate Producer Tanya Ivanova, and all of us here at Due Process, I'm Raymond Brown. Thanks for watching.
Mount Laurel really used to be a sprawling farmland. It has become a suburbia of Philadelphia. There's a lot of new condominiums around, lots of new shops. We're in Laurel Acres Park here in Mount Laurel. Mount Laurel does offer many parks. This is one of the bigger ones. Right behind me is a great place to throw the line in if you like to fish. They have a great track around the park if you'd like to rollerblade or bicycle or go for a walk, get some fresh air. Mount Laurel is a great town to live in. You have your nature, you have great shops, wonderful restaurants, and a terrific school system. And I know I played a lot of soccer games here at Laurel Acres, and for all you soccer moms and dads out there, you'll be spending a lot of time here too.
Even more insight on law and justice? Become a fan of Due Process on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and watch us on demand on YouTube.